Hello everybody. So in today's video we are going to make shortbread apple crumble squares. I'm excited. So let's get started. We're going to make the shortbread base first. So I am going to double this recipe just because I know this one is going to be one my family loves. So I'm just going to go ahead and double it right away. So for the shortbread base, for 1 times the recipe, you need half a cup of butter. So I'm going to use a whole cup. Ooh. So I'm just going to put that right in. Actually, that's the rest of this package here. Don't even need to measure. Okay, so the first step is to put it in your mixer and then blend it really, really nicely. You're supposed to cream it until it's almost white. So this is going to take about 5 minutes. You might need to take the butter off of the paddle attachment a few times just to make sure it's getting mixed up nicely. So this is part of what I'm talking about here. See how it's all stuck on my paddle? I'm going to take it off and I'm going to keep taking it off until it starts to cream on the bottom more. Give it a chance to kind of try and cream up so it doesn't stick to the paddle. You could also do this with a whisk attachment, but then you're going to use 2 different attachments, so I would just use 1. But if you wanted to cream it a little bit easier, you could use it with a whisk attachment. There we go. If you need to, you can stop it in between and get all of that down on the bottom there. See how it's missing it? So I'm going to stop it again and just keep making sure it gets mixed in. Okay, now that the butter is creamed, I'm going to add in the salt, the vanilla, and the sugar. So for the salt, we need about 1/4 teaspoon. So I doubled that, so that's going to be 1/2 teaspoon. And then for the vanilla, it's about 1 teaspoon. So I'm going to double that. Put about 2 in there. And then the recipe here says sugar. It doesn't say granulated sugar or powdered sugar. I am going to use powdered sugar. I just know from the past of making shortbread recipes, it gives a really nice fluffy, creamy texture if you use powdered sugar. So I'm going to use powdered sugar. So we need 1/4 cup for single the recipe and 1/2 cup for double. So there's 1/2. Now we're gonna beat this together again. Mix it together with the butter. Make sure it's all nice and creamed together before we start adding in the flour. Okay, this looks all creamed together. I just want to make sure it's all nice and mixed together nice. Okay. And then it says 1 cup of flour. So because I'm doubling this, I'm going to add 2 cups. But I'm going to add 1 for now, and then we're going to see the texture of it first. Let's mix up some of the stuff off the bottom here. Make sure it's mixing all nice. Okay, the dough is still really nice and wet, so I think I can add a little bit more flour. Let's add 1/2 cup of the last remaining cup. About 1/2. I find some recipes online add a little bit too much flour to the shortbread, so that's why I'm adding it little by little here, just to make sure that the texture's right. Yes, I think we're good enough to add another half a cup. So this will be the full 2 cups for double the recipe. Okay, I think that's good. Yes, the texture's perfect. Okay, so let's get out a pan. So for half the recipe, you need about an 8 by 8 inch pan, but because I doubled it, I'm gonna go get a 9 by 13. So let me put some stuff away and then we'll get started with doing the base. So now that I have my parchment paper and my pan out, I have my oven preheated to 300 degrees. So the parchment paper, I'm going to line parts of it so that I'm able to take the squares out better out of the pan later when this recipe is done. Let's go this way. So all I'm doing is going to put a piece in like this. I'm going to fold down the edges just so it has a really nice crisp edge, like that. And then see if I have enough left of this roll. Oh, I don't. Okay, let's get the other one. Okay. You can fold these if you need to. I don't think I'm going to need to. Let's see here. No, I probably could have just used one. It's okay. We're going to do it like that. Make sure these edges are a little bit more crisp. Kind of feels a little bit like origami. Origami, pardon me. Okay, so now we're going to take the shortbread dough and we're going to put it right into the pan. This is going to be the base of the apple square. So all we're doing is pressing it right down into all the crevices and make it a nice even layer. This dough is perfect. I think I'm going to keep this recipe for this dough because I've used other shortbread doughs. I made one last year that was a little dry. This one is perfect. So all I'm doing is just pressing it in to the corners. You don't want it to be too thin in any area, otherwise the square will break when you cut it. So I'm just going along the edge like this to make sure it looks nice and even so that when you cut the square, it doesn't look all jagged. Just little aesthetic things, you don't have to do this. So I'm just going to level this out a little bit. It's a little thick in some spots. Okay, I think that's good. Just want to make sure it's nice and even. If it isn't, one piece will have a little bit thicker of a piece, but we want it to be as close as possible. Okay, so now I'm going to stick this into the oven for about 15 minutes, and when that's done, we're going to make the next layer. It's not going to cook it all the way because it does have to bake again, so keep that in mind. Okay, so I let this cool for a couple minutes. It's not completely baked. I can see that there's some spots in the center here that are not completely cooked, which is good. So for the next layer, I'm going to do it a little differently than the recipe. I have this jar of apple pie filling that I have from last year that I need to use, so I'm going to use that. But in the recipe it says, for the middle layer, you use 3 apples peeled and thinly sliced, 2 tablespoons of flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And you mix that all together and then you layer the apples inside. But because I have this pie filling, I'm going to use this. It's essentially creating the same thing. So this is another reason why I doubled the recipe, because I want to be able to use most of this jar. So I'm just going to take this in and layer the apples as best as I can throughout the entire second layer here. This apple pie filling was delicious. This is the same apple pie filling I used in that galette video. It was a huge hit, by the way. Everybody loved those galettes. They were delicious. So I'm just going right to the edge because it's going to cook nice and evenly, so hopefully it won't overseep too much. I'm trying to do somewhat of a single layer here so it's nice and even, not big and all lumpy. So I'm just situating the apples. And this is what you want to do with the apple slices that you use as well. If you don't want to use apple slices, you could literally go buy a can of apple pie filling and do the exact same thing I'm doing here. Especially if you don't have time. A lot of people don't have time. I think I'm going to make a lot more of this apple pie filling. It was delicious. I loved the recipe. All the liquid and the apples and the seasonings were perfect. I'm trying not to get too much of the liquid everywhere. Trying to kind of space it out a little bit. I don't want that area of it to fall apart when I cut it. I'm happy it used this entire jar. I wasn't sure if this pan would use the entire jar or not. So I'm just going to spread out some of these apples, make sure all the areas are covered. And that's what your second layer should look like. Just give me one sec here. Position this apple a little bit better. That's what the second layer should look like. Okay, so let's make the crumble topping now. Okay, let's put that aside. Okay, so for the crumble topping, we need about half a cup of flour for 1 times the recipe, but I'm doubling this, so I'm going to use a whole cup. We need 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, so I need about 1 1/2. This is a 1/2 cup measure. It's quite a bit of brown sugar. Okay. And then we need about 1/4 of a cup of butter. I'm going to need about 1/2 cup. So So I'm just going to give this a mix first. Make sure it's mixed nice and well together. I am going to mix this with my hands with the butter. I think it's a little bit easier to get the crumbly texture of the crumble topping. Okay, so now let's get the butter. So as I've mentioned before, on these packages, I'm not sure if they're like this in the US, but these packages actually have measurements on them. So this is about 1/4 cup, and we need double that. I'm just going to cut it into chunks, make it a little bit easier for me to break up. Okay, now let's break that up and just crumble it all together. So you just want these to be like crumbled right in. It's kind of like pie dough. You want it to be kind of really pea-sized and really mixed in with the powder mixture here, the dry mixture. So I'm just going to break this up. You could do this in a food processor as well. I'm attempting to dirty as little dishes as possible. So you just keep doing this until the powder is combined with the butter and it's more of a crumbly mixture. You could also use a pastry cutter if you wanted. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. Might be a little bit faster. Okay, it's starting to get there. Okay, I think that's fairly close. So now we're going to put this on top of our mixture here. So we're going to take the pie, well, the shortbread apple base, it's not pie, and we're going to evenly coat the top layer here. And the liquid from the apples is going to mix in with this, so don't be too alarmed by how crumbly it is. And there's also butter that's going to melt and make this all nice and gooey and delicious. Okay, and that's what it should look like. So you're going to bake the mixture in the oven for an additional 30 minutes. Once that's done, I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So they're out of the oven. The top is a little bit more soft than I was expecting, but I think they'll be okay. Let's see if we can get them out without breaking them too much. I would say if I was to make this recipe again, because if you look closely, you can see some of the butter on top. If I was to do it, I'd probably cut some of the butter back, maybe by 1/8 cup, just to make it a little bit more floury. I think that would probably suit this recipe a little bit better. I don't know if this is going to come out nice. Let's see. There we go. Wipe my hands. So this recipe is quite gooey, I'm noticing, but I think they're going to be delicious. So let's cut off a couple. I did cool these down for probably about an hour. I put them in the fridge to cool them down a bit. But like I was saying about the top, I would add just a little bit less butter. Okay, so let's try putting this square out. That's what it looks like. Hopefully you can see that. There's a better angle right there. Some of the middle's a bit gooey. I would eat these with a fork, but they look pretty good. Let me show you close up what they look like in the inside. So this is a close-up view. If you see what I mean, it's a little soft on top. They look delicious though. You can see the different layers, and that's what I was shooting for. I think this would be a perfect Christmas time treat. And other than a couple little tweaks to the recipe, I think this recipe is a keeper. I'm just going to tweak it just a little bit next time. And I think I'll make it again. So I hope you guys try it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.